All right. So normally we would have done our breakout rooms, and for our future sessions, if you'll be joining us, we will be doing breakout rooms. But since we couldn't do that today, I wanted to give everybody the opportunity for us to get to know you a little bit. We'll do a little bit more of that in the first session if you join us. And it sounds like from what I hear from all of you, those that shared about what you're doing and what you're excited about, is really looking at how you can address some of the challenges you may have around diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, and we'll talk about the difference between those two areas of work in a little bit. Um, Learning and building relationships with others in the community, for those of you that are new to the community, and really building on some of the great work that you've already done, because it sounds like just about everyone has sort of at least dipped their toe in and maybe went a little further and they're all the way in, right? And so as we move through this and I share kind of how this opportunity will shape up, you can decide if it aligns with the work that you're already doing, and how you and others at your organization might be involved. So I'm going to share my screen because I want to go through a few things um, so that we have the opportunity to still have questions at the end. So I won't spend a tremendous amount of time talking. Can everybody see my screen? I'm also going to spotlight my video so that you can still see me while I'm presenting. Um, and so in terms of today's agenda, we've just went through sort of an overview, did some welcome and introductions, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what is this and why. So what is anti-racism? And I know we've been hearing a lot of terms lately, and as a person who's been doing this work, we are seeing this term kind of crop up in a more intentional way, and people are talking about it because, up until about, I would say 3 or 4 years ago, we really was doing a lot of education, and there's been trainings like Undoing Racism from the People's Institute and beyond, or DEI trainings or things like that, that really looked at, the history around what created the conditions that we see today and ways that we can address them, more on an individual and interpersonal level. And as we saw with the pandemic, we started to have more thoughtful conversations about what are the structural disparities that are perpetuating some of these conditions, and what can we do about them. And then unfortunately, we all witnessed the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, which has once again in this nation called our attention to the ways that race really shapes people's experiences and their interactions with systems. So anti-racism differs in that we would be looking at eliminating racism by changing systems, organizational structures, policies, and practices. So we still do talk about individual attitudes and how that influences people's interactions with systems. So these are two definitions that we use in this work that can anchor us in this particular opportunity and will be our guiding definitions as we move through the entire cohort. But it really is about, anti-racism is not a state of arriving to a thing or something. It's really a being and a constant evolution towards seeing and being in the world in order to transform it. And because racism occurs at every level of society, it can function to produce and maintain exclusionary levels, right? And so we believe anti-racism education is necessary in all aspects of society. We've been doing a lot of that work in the DEI area, but we want to really start to look at systems as well, and not just our systems within our organizations, but our systems in the communities that we live in. So on the original invitation, it talked about, you know, the communities as well. So this is really about what can we all do to influence anti-racism in our communities that we operate in and the communities we serve. So from the foundation's perspective, I know one or two people have alluded to doing some DEI work before, and looking forward to this concept of Community Foundation of Eastern Connecticut taking a step to go deeper by doing, moving beyond the one and done, which seems to be a theme with the work of Community Foundation of Eastern Connecticut that I'm happy to be a part of. But when we look at our why, it's our vision, mission, and our values that's driving this, right? And our vision is a healthy, thriving, sustainable Eastern Connecticut with greater equity for all. We recently changed our vision to include the greater for equity for all after we as a staff and as a board have begun to move more towards anti-racist practice within our organization, which is taking a step above diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we'll talk about DEI versus anti-racism in a second. And our mission is to collaborate with our partners to put philanthropy into action to address the needs, rights, and interests of our community in Eastern Connecticut. And so we see you all as partners, though we provide financial resources through our grant making to support the wonderful work you're doing in Eastern Connecticut. We also see you as partners to really be more intentional with our philanthropy to address the needs, rights, and the interests of the community throughout Eastern Connecticut. And that's all driven by our values around integrity, equity, respect, and courage. So we understand that equity is something that's needed all across the state and in our region. And we believe that we embody the courage to create opportunities for deeper, more meaningful ways in discussing and acknowledging the role that race plays in shaping people's lives. And contributes to the disparities that we've seen over the last couple of months. So I just want to take a minute to talk about the DEI versus anti-racism paradigm, because I know that many on this call have participated in a DEI initiative, and feel free to drop any questions in the chat as I'm speaking. So diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity, we in the social justice arena, we see as the presence of difference, and equity is really about the equitable distribution of resources and balance of power. And inclusion is all about is the culture of your institution or your practices inclusive of all those that are represented when you create diversity. So many individuals say, okay, we have an organization or we have a board and it looks like this demographic wise. How do we increase and disperse the participation and the membership of our boards, our staff, so that it's more reflective of the world we actually live in, which is a more diverse world, right? And then we do that, and we do that through our hiring, we do that through our recruitment, we do that through outreach, or we do that through relationship building. And then when we bring people into those spaces, workplaces, and all those boards, we want to make sure that they're inclusive. And inclusive means when we talk about inclusivity, it's really about, is it a welcoming, inclusive environment in our language, our practice, respect for other people's cultures, right? So we don't only want to create the presence of difference by bringing people in, we want to make sure that those places that we bring people into are also inclusive. Now, equity, because people used to just talk about diversity and inclusion, right? And then at some point we evolved to include the E in there. And then the E represents equity. And when I do workplace work, when we look at equity, we just want to make sure that everyone who, if you have a diverse staff and team, right, is there equitable opportunities for all of those diverse staff and all those all those staff members and board members to have equal access to power, equal access to participation, right? Are people just there visually and then you're talking about diversity and the presence of difference, or is there really equitable distribution of power within your organization? And so that's what we look at in the social justice arena around diversity, equity, inclusion. And all that to say is it really looks at personal and interpersonal relationships, right? Whereas anti-racism looks at structural disparities and looks at systems that perpetuate many of the disparities that we see today, right? And so we have recently heard a lot about this term, and we have Ibram Kendi's book that gives us sort of an idea of how to be anti-racist. And in that book, he talks a lot about what does it mean and what he means by what an anti-racist is. And what he contends is that, you know, we can all say that we're not racist, right? Like that we're not doing something, right? Like we're not being racist towards individuals, or we're not participating in systemic structures that perpetuate race. But he contends that you can't be neutral on the matter, right? So he says you're either racist or you're anti-racist, that there's no neutrality, right? And what he means is that being inactive is not helpful either. So it's not enough to say, when I do my trainings, I always have, because when you broadcast a training, most of the time you're preaching to the choir. So I get many people in the trainings who say, well, I grew up in a household where my families, really celebrated different. They encourage us to be kind to everyone. They have these core values around what we promote around DEI, right? So most of the people that we're already talking to hold those core values, right? But being anti-racist challenges you to actually actively engage and do something about what you see around you, right? And so when you're the community that you live in, what does that look like on the anti-racist front? And what could you be doing to actively engage in activities that create a shift? And so when we did this other conversation with trustees from other foundations and giving organizations, we talked about what are some of the ways that we can do that. And it's around organizational development, it's around financial decisions, around relationships and advocacy, right? And so one of the things that all of you do is you serve individuals in the community who, for whatever reason or another, are feeling the weight of the disparities in society, right? So somebody mentioned the ALICE population, somebody mentioned providing educational programs to students, but not getting the students in the door that they feel could benefit most from these experiences, right? And it sounds like it looks like your group or the people you serve all like one type of group and not it doesn't truly reflect the diversity you'd like to see. So when you talk about being anti-racist, you start to question why. And traditionally, we focus the whys and the interrogation of this on individuals. Let me give you an example. We say, here's this lovely program that students from low income families would benefit from. And we create the program, right? And we put it out there, we put flyers out there, we talk to the schools, we try to get the students in. But then we can't quite understand why the students aren't coming to us. And so when they aren't coming to us, we say, okay, we know what we need to do. Maybe we might hire a staff of color. Maybe we might hire a community engagement liaison or community engagement officer to go out and get people. And maybe we might just keep pushing information, to build it, they will come model, right? Nothing wrong with that. But what that strategy does, it really focuses on the individual, and it might not interrogate the construct of why someone isn't coming. And there could be multiple reasons, right? But it's not until you interrogate that you could really understand and really say, how can I be more intentional about bringing these individuals into this opportunity? And asking ourselves, is this opportunity reflective of what that community wants? So there's a way that we do our work and we develop a lot of things on behalf of people. We speak for people. We don't include them in the conversation. And in this work, that's the thing that I see mostly, having a history of working nonprofit and then moving more into this space, is most of the programs that I have worked for and been a part of were just great ideas. We all drummed up in the boardroom because we thought we knew what was best for people. We didn't include them in that conversation. So one of the most immediate ways to work towards being anti-racist is to assess where your organization is, right? Listen to those most impacted by the issue, and then start to co-create and design the solutions around what they want. So those are 3 immediate steps that we can take. But if we wanted to go further, we can also look at what are some of the things that create the conditions that people experience who we serve, right? What are those conditions around homelessness, around being in the ALICE population, around access to childcare? What are some of the issues underneath that? And how could we serve as advocates and allies to raise awareness around those issues and hopefully build more support for individuals who we are serving, so that they don't just become the recipients of our service, but we become partners in eradicating those conditions in the community that perpetuate the conditions they're experiencing. I'm just going to pause for a minute to see if that's making sense for people, and if you have any questions. You can unmute yourself and speak, or you can just drop them in the chat. And again, I can't see everyone's faces, so you'll have to just speak or drop something in the chat if something isn't making sense for you, if you have a question. So does everyone quite understand what the difference is between looking at diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism? You know, is everyone following that sort of philosophy? Thanks, Ellen. Yes, Ellen put in the chat. Yes, and Mary and Wendy. Thank you. And I know we use those terms interchangeably, and so part of this cohort is really to uncover all of these terms and what these terms mean, so that when we use language within our organizations and we talk about what we're doing, we are making sure that we are really codifying what we're doing with those right areas, right? So, you know, in this work, we see anti-racism as another level up. And I have friends who say, well, you know, I don't want to do any more DEI work. I just want to do anti-racism work because the time is now, the time has always been now, we need justice. And I think that that's great, but I also see DEI as an opportunity to enter into the conversation, to get some ground level understanding, right? And then also it gives us an opportunity to say, okay, we did the DEI, what's the next level up? And the next level up is being anti-racist. So I think DEI is always a great way to enter into this conversation for organizations who haven't thought about this before, haven't had to think about it before. And then it allows us, it gives us that foundational understanding of how we can be better towards each other, be better in our organizations, so that we can prime ourselves up for doing anti-racist work, right? So let's talk a little bit about, you know, participation in this cohort, because I know this, many of the individuals on the call have said that they might be bringing this information back to other organizations, or they're trying to evaluate, you know, where they are and how this fits into work that you're already doing and what this whole thing is. So I'm not going to give away all the goodies about each and every session that we're going to cover. You'll get that if you sign up, but I will tell you this. So we are asking that you send a max of 2 members of your organization. And if we don't reach our enrollment capacity, we will definitely offer, you know, more spaces if you have others who want to participate. We're asking people to commit to attending the 6 2.5-hour sessions. And this doesn't mean you can't miss a session. If you have 2 members from your organization with you, then you all can support each other if someone needs to not be involved for 1 or 2 sessions. We will also be having breakout rooms. The reason it's 2.5 hours is because 30 minutes will always be breakout rooms. I had thought about bringing people together twice a month, right? Once for breakouts, for processing and conversation, and then, you know, for our time together. And I thought, let me just bridge it all into one thing to make it easier. So a half hour of each of our sessions will be spent with our groups. I will be putting you in groups that you will be with for the entire cohort. It'll be an opportunity to build relationships, share some learnings, share what you're gaining. And then also, we hope to foster some collaborations through this effort. We hope to operate more than one cohort because there, you know, participation is limited. We can't have too large of a group because it starts to distill the experience, the intimate experience. So we will have, you know, 25 to 30 max participating of individuals. And then if there's a demand, we would want to run a second cohort. We will ask that you complete pre-session activities. I do a lot of training, and training can happen in a day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, which means I'm often trying to select content purposefully and make the most of our time together. So we will ask that you complete pre-session activities. You will be given sort of what you need to read for our session, and then complimentary readings. I know that we all don't have time to read entire books between each session, so it's my intention and to provide podcasts or YouTube videos or articles for the pre-session activities, and then further readings, should you want to engage in them, would be an extensive book list, but they would be kind of gathered by our topics. You all can tell I'm a professor in college. So, and then We're asking that you don't just participate in this cohort to say, thanks for the information, I learned something, but we want to support you. And one of our sessions will be dedicated to developing an action plan within your organization. And so that means most of your learnings, contextual learnings and history and things like that, will not be in the sessions. We will kind of just highlight them and connect them to our work. But we want to spend more time with preparing you with tools and opportunities to think thoughtfully about an actual next step you can take. Now, we know that it takes a lot to undo inequity. And though we've been feeling the weight of it for a very long time, we always wish we can wish it away tomorrow, but it just doesn't work that way. This is long-term work. And so our expectation is that you identify something tangible that you can do that's realistic. And so we will talk about SMART goals, right? And we like to have SMART goals towards this because it gives you something. Whenever someone completes something and they achieve it, it energizes them to keep going. If you identify a goal and you can't achieve it, it definitely makes people feel reluctant to move forward. So I'm just putting that out there, as though you're going to be hearing a lot about the vast disparities that we could be addressing and the challenges that are in our organization. There's no way that one 6-month cohort can take away all of this. What we need is everyone doing their part and doing a little something to chip away at this little by little. And I always say, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time, right? But if you try to eat an entire elephant, you'd never get there. You wouldn't even try. So we're just expecting you to take this information and identify 1 or 2 next steps that you could actually achieve that would at least build a culture of anti-racism practice within your organization. So that each year you're going back and you're reflecting and you're saying, okay, what can we do next year? What can we do next year? We did this, we checked that off. What can we do next year? So that it keeps the momentum going, and it doesn't become a one and done, as I think Elizabeth mentioned, that it really, and the reason we're doing this cohort, the other reason we're doing this cohort with organizations is we want you to embody the practices within your organization. I'm a facilitator and a consultant, and I do work with organizations, but we always want the work to live within the organization. It can't live with a facilitator. The facilitator is a guide. They offer information, they offer awareness, they offer tools, they offer new ways of seeing, right? That's what we do. We want the work to live within your organization. So with that said, this is just the very basic requirements or commitments that we're asking for you in your organization for participation. And my intention is to find a time that works for all of us on a consistent basis throughout each of the sessions to so that we can all commit to, so that we can ensure that it doesn't conflict with other monthly meetings that you all may have or other convenings. So we look to identify a time that ensures that there wouldn't be barriers to your participation. It's difficult to replicate the sessions, right? Like to catch people up. Some things you just need to be there for. And I will record most of the context setting, but I won't record the processing because that's just not fair to ensuring that this is a safe and inclusive space, right? For people to feel like they would be on camera, revealing sort of what they're processing after learning something. So really only the context setting would be recorded, but not the actual things that happen organically when you talk across difference and when you talk these things out so that we can learn and grow together. So we won't be recording those portions of the session. And I have a question in the chat that I want to address. It says, is the session commitment once a month or twice a month? When would the work begin? So Lori, right now we're looking at once a month. I don't know if twice a month is realistic for everyone. I would look to hear, and those of you, you can drop it in the chat just to offer me some thoughts. I've done this before, and the twice a month has always seemed too much for people. So open to hearing ideas, but right now I had it planned out for once a month. And we plan to have our first session in November. which is why we wanted to make sure we had this call today before I go away for a few days, because we want to make sure that the next session is within the next 2 weeks. So does that answer you, Lori? Okay, and I have someone saying that twice a month would be too much for a small organization. Yeah, those were our thoughts exactly. So we're definitely looking at once a month. So we have just a few minutes left for questions, and I timed it just right. I'm so shocked and happy with myself. So I just wanted to leave a few minutes for questions if people have them, or thoughts or reactions. We're here, we're listening. So since people don't have questions,
Randy, there's no cost to this for organizations to refer them out, so there's no cost for this.
No, there's no cost, but they should be serving. And I'm sorry, Jen, I forgot to put this in our notes, even though we did talk about this. I forgot to put in our notes that there isn't a cost. However, this really is for organizations who are serving the Eastern Connecticut region. I already got a phone call asking, could people outside of the region participate? If we opened it up, we wouldn't be able to sustain that. We would have a great amount of interest.
Yeah, for sure. So we can go ahead, if you're starting it this month soon, we did include this in our follow-up email to our last session. We can go ahead and provide that to those organizations and make that clarification. So that's great. And I know that was a big concern, was the financials. So certainly grateful for you all making this accessible to other organizations. That's great.
So no,
how big are you, Randy, how big are you expecting the cohort to be? I think there's 16 or 17 of us, or where are you maxing out at?
We are maxing out at 30, ideally 25, but 30 is the max. And that's really because I'm putting you all into groups. And if the groups are too large, it's not going to work well.
And 2 people per organization, so we're talking 14 or 15 groups. I'm wondering if it makes sense, a staff person and a board person, or just staff, if you have thoughts on that.
Miriam, you can jump in. And I know there's another opportunity for boards through another cohort that's happening across Connecticut. And so ideally, I would say boards should participate in that cohort because it's looking at it a little differently, but I don't know if it would be excluded. Miriam, you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I wanted to suggest to Wendy, please coordinate with Jennifer, because Jennifer has a plan to reach out to a number of organizations. So I just want to make sure that it's a coordinated approach. Second is we are currently doing a trustee anti-racist cohort, but that's really focused on funders and foundations. So you would be very welcome to invite a couple of trustees to join this cohort. And we really, as Randy mentioned, would like to keep it under 30, 35 to make it manageable. And so I want to make sure that we reach out and welcome as many as we can, with the caveat of not going beyond that manageable size. So hopefully, if anyone has ideas of other people to invite, just connect with Jennifer so that she can keep track of the numbers and organizations that we're reaching out to. Thank you.
Randy,
Randy,
just to clarify, it's us plus 2?
No, so 2 from your organization total. We didn't know if everyone on the call, we didn't know if everyone on the call today would be participating.
But
so
2 people from our.
Yeah, and 2 people from your organization. If I don't hit my max, I'll send out another note inviting others to add an additional person. But we want to, and don't, it's 30 attendees, not 30 organizations. And don't be discouraged if you're a company of one. I call it, that's my little term, I call it, but don't be discouraged if you're a company of one to participate. You'll be in a group that'll give you some support, so you won't be alone. That's why we're not dividing groups up by organizations. We want, if there's an individual who can only commit and you can't get someone else to commit, we still want you to join us. And I didn't want to assume everyone here was signing up because we have 3 of us that are here, 4 of us that are from the staff. So Miriam, Jennifer, and Allison won't be in every session. So don't count that number in our 2. And even if they did attend the session, they wouldn't count in our max participation. So they are welcome to come and be in some of the groups. So those of you that are on the call, I'll ask if you can definitely indicate your interest to participate as soon as you can, because as Miriam mentioned, Jennifer is going to coordinate with Wendy for some additional reach out. And then if there's room to invite a 3rd person, we want to have time to invite that 3rd person. So as soon as you know, it'd be helpful to send me an email and let me know who's participating, and I'll start to create a group via email with our materials. And I probably will set up, one of the tools I use with another group is I set up an entire Google site with all our recordings, our readings, so you can go to one place and find everything. That way you don't have to sift through all the emails to find all the readings, what we're going to talk about from week to week. So I'll probably just set up a site where you can go and get everything. And if you miss something, or if you want to jump ahead, you'll and kind of skim through what's what, you'll be able to do that as well. Do we have any, I see something in the chat, sorry, if there's any other questions. So I answered, it's 30 attendees, not 30 organizations. And again, if we need to run a second one, we would. Not going anywhere for the foreseeable future. So. And we do understand that some people can't make this type of commitment. So we've already talked about if there are people who reach out to us, if there's something we can hold on a quarterly basis to support others as well who may not be able to commit right now.
Yeah, I would just add to that, that's part of, for those that can't, there are many organizations right now who can't commit to that right now. So I know Jen and I have been talking about what those kind of one-off pieces that can keep those organizations going, but this is great timing for those who are ready to do this work, and so many are. So this is great for us to help get people engaged who want to, but we're here to work with you as well on those kind of singular and quarterly events that we can keep people, just keep moving in the right direction. Right? It's great.
Are there any other questions, thoughts? And I'm going to drop my email address in the chat again for those that may not have it. It's randy@cfect.org. You can send me an email directly. And I know it was in our communication that we sent out, but and it's on the website.
I just want to add too, if you have any ideas of some organizations that you think would really benefit from this, we're going to have, we've had this session recorded so we can send it out so people can listen to that. I'm going to do that I have on my mind. I'll connect with Wendy, but you may have some thoughts too. So just email me and let me know if you have any additional thoughts. But I think this is a really terrific opportunity. It builds on the great work we've done, and Randy is a great facilitator. So I think you will all enjoy this work as well.
All right, so we're about 1 minute to our time. If there are any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. If not, I look forward to your email and encourage you to have a great day and the rest of your week if the weather is going to get better. We won't know the result of the election, but I am a mindfulness practitioner, so I'm going to encourage you to take care of yourself and practice, take what you need to not allow that to consume you. Have plenty of apps and things and free stuff. If you need anything, please reach out to me. Have a good day for those of you who are signing off.